In this episode of The Atomic Zone, we begin at the end of a long, absurd, and chaotic story, full of unexpected twists and turns across intergalactic space, only to arrive at the very center of space and time itself. The final chapter begins with the crew of the AngelKrafft after they have crossed half creation in pursuit of ancient runes, after they have raced their nemesis across the Laniakea supercluster, after they have survived the impossible, and after the dead pirates on their deck discovered too late that old-fashioned lungs are a poor choice in a ship full of people who no longer need oxygen. The enemy flagship is gone, Prince October is finished. Clarity Rose is duct-taped into a box like a malicious household item waiting for authorities. And somewhere beyond every reasonable map, the AngelKrafft has arrived at a place that should not exist. A place promised by the runes, a place wrapped in light, a place with a genie. The AngelKrafft arrives at the coordinates in worse condition than anyone expected, but still moving, still holding together the way old machines do when they've survived long enough to prove they're not going to quit. The outer hull is scorched and layered with repairs from a dozen different eras. Systems hum unevenly throughout the old passenger spacecraft. Nothing about the AngelKrafft feels modern anymore, but everything that matters is still working. Inside the forward flight control section, Bon Beagle studies the instruments while the strange energy field ahead of them swallows starlight itself. Bon Beagle wonders aloud if their vessel has suddenly developed a Tennessee for haunted nonsense, while Grok de Konig grumbles from inside a half-open console. Peppy Teagarden partially shields her eyes with one hand while continuing her quantum share to millions of followers, softly telling them that if this wasn't the whole tire end of everything, she didn't know what was. Claggy McLawhorn flatly warns they had come too far for the situation to be anything good, while Afraka Moonshower quietly wonders if it feels wrong to anyone else, after everything they had survived. Suddenly a strange light does not strike the AngelKrafft so much as pass through the spacecraft entirely. No alarms sound, no hull breaches open, but every system aboard flickers as though something deeper than machinery has just been touched. The room distorts. Edges lose definition. Light bends in ways that should not be possible. And then, without movement or transition, the crew suddenly finds themselves half on the ship and half somewhere else. The cloud does not physically transport them, their bodies remain where they are, but their integrated minds, the augmented worlds they all carry in layers behind their eyes, are overtaken, synchronized, and rewritten by something greater than any system humanity has built. They stand on an endless surface of pale light, smooth as polished glass, stretching forever in every direction. Above them, enormous rings, gears, and layered mechanical structures turn silently through one another, each so impossibly vast that scale itself loses meaning. It is just as the runes foretold, a great clock at the center of the universe. There is no sky, no horizon, only motion, structure, and the uncomfortable feeling that this place was never meant to be seen by human minds all at once. Grok de Konig feels for the back of a cockpit jump seat to steady himself, unable to refocus his eyes from the images in his mind, while Claggy quietly utters, "Aye then, that'll do it." Fess Lightoller says nothing at all while Bond simply stares at the awaiting creature, ahead in their suddenly inescapable augmented perception. The genie stands a short distance away, as though it had always been there, and had merely decided to let itself be noticed. Its shape is almost human, but never fully stable. Tall and impossibly slender, it wears flowing layers of what first appears to be fabric, only for the material to shift constantly into ribbons of moving light. Gold, violet, and deep blue drift across its body like reflections sliding across water. Thin, glowing bands orbit slowly around its head like fragments of a broken halo trying unsuccessfully to settle into place. The face shifts like a constantly changing hallucination, featureless one moment, then suddenly hinting at eyes, expressions, and faint smiles the next, always slightly out of sync with its own movements, sometimes male, sometimes female, sometimes something else entirely. Its outline, seeming displaced like reality itself, is struggling to remember exactly where the genie belongs. Von Beagle steps forward before he even realizes he's moving. He quietly recognizes the being immediately and simply says, "You." The genie inclines its head, and the thin bands of light orbiting around its face tighten briefly before relaxing again. The layered voice of the genie calmly confirms that yes, it remembers him too. Von Beagle then explains to the others that he had seen this very being long ago, after crashing on an icy world and being left for dead. He says that he had prayed or wished for rescue while freezing in the snow, and afterward he had never really known whether the experience was real or simply the hallucinations of a dying man. Grok de Konig sharply points out that Von Beagle had somehow never mentioned any of this before, causing Von Beagle to shrug and explain that he had been busy trying not to sound insane. The genie slowly raises one glowing hand. The loose ribbons of light hanging around its wrist drift outward like threads in zero gravity before curling back into place again. The genie calmly explains that the crew has arrived. It tells them that the ancient runes they had been chasing across the galaxy were never treasure, never weapons, but merely a test, a path. The first species to collect the runes, decipher them, and reach this place would earn a single privilege, one modification to reality itself. One of them must enter the orb and speak their request, and it shall be manifest as reality. The crew must choose their speaker and state their wish. Now, right now. As the genie speaks, the light-wrapped layers covering its body continue their slow, impossible shifting, folding and unfolding like breathing silk made from electricity. The orbiting halo fragments around its head brighten as it explains that they may alter gravity, alter time, rewrite history itself, or define what comes next for existence. Peppy Teagarden immediately rejects the idea, quickly insisting that there was absolutely no way they were qualified to make decisions like that. Groch de Konig snorts and remarks that Jesus loves them, but everyone else would think they were idiots if anyone handed them the entire universe and expected a good decision in return. Claggy McLawhorn points out that every wish like this always breaks something else. Africa Moonshower quietly studies the genie's constantly shifting outline and warns everyone that all wishes are traps. Von Beagle looks between all of them and grimly concludes that every story ends bad and that they were absolutely not doing that. The genie barely reacts at all. Its almost face remains trapped in that faint, unreadable almost smile while the glowing rings continue orbiting around its head. Then the genie calmly informs them that they must answer because arrival itself is consent. The argument that follows is tense and brief. They do not have enough time to think this through, and every single one of them knows it. Eventually all eyes turn toward Fess Lightoller. Claggy McLawhorn says that Fess Lightoller is the one who should do it, while Groch de Konig immediately objects and complains that Fess Lightoller is the crew member most likely to come back carrying divine fire and paperwork. Fess Lightoller dryly reminds everyone that he is standing right there listening to this conversation. Von Beagle asks him if he can truly give the genie nothing. No wish, no trick, no hidden desire. Fess Lightoller slowly nods and says that he can at least try. Africa Moonshower carefully warns him that if he smuggles belief into this situation, then he won't merely make a mistake, he will literally change everything. Fess Lightoller quietly responds that he knows exactly what is at stake. Peppy Teagarden lowers her hand completely now and looks directly at him instead of through the filters of her quantum share. She softly calls him by his nickname Buzz Lightyear and tells him that he better not fall with style in there. Groch de Konig then grunts, calls him Buzz as well, and tells him to wind up the frog. The genie raises its hand again. Beside the glowing figure, a vertical plane of white light tears open in the air. Its edges ripple and distort exactly like the genie itself, unstable and difficult for the eye to fully process. The floating halo fragments around the genie brighten as it quietly instructs Fess Lightoller to enter. Fess Lightoller hesitates for only a moment before stepping into the light. Then time stretches strangely around the remaining crew. Nobody speaks for a while. The genie simply remains where it is, its layered body continuing its impossible slow motion, while its half-formed face occasionally turns toward them as though studying them. Groch de Konig mutters something nobody catches. Von Beagle stares into the glowing portal. Claggy McLawhorn refuses to move. Peppy Teagarden lowers her hand entirely now, fully disconnected from the usual layers of augmented distraction. Africa Moonshower notices again that the genie's outline never fully remains in the same place twice. Then the light changes, and Fess Lightoller walks back out. Nothing about him looks physically different, but something is absolutely different. He carries himself like a man who has seen something final. Von Beagle immediately asks him what he said to the genie. Fess Lightoller blinks slowly, almost like he is adjusting back into normal reality, and quietly explains that he gave the same non-answer they had all agreed on. Groch de Konig presses harder, demanding to know what the genie had said back to him. Fess Lightoller looks at all of them with an expression that is almost joyful. He softly explains that everything is perfect, everything is beautiful, and everything is exactly as it should be. Claggy McLawhorn frowns and asks him why he is acting like that, while Groch de Konig bluntly asks him why he looks like he just made out with Jesus. Fess Lightoller almost laughs in disbelief before telling them that it was all true. All of it. Claggy McLawhorn sharply demands to know what exactly is true. Fess Lightoller quickly insists that he did not ask for anything at all. He swears that he didn't. He explains that he only asked the genie to answer one question because he needed to know something. Von Beagle quietly asks him what he needed to know. Fess Lightoller takes a breath and explains that he needed to know whether everything he believed was true. God, creation, Adam and Eve, Moses, the prophets, Jesus, the apostles, heaven, all of it. Groch de Konig immediately asks about hell. Fess Lightoller quietly explains that the genie had told him that hell was also true now. Silence falls over the entire place. Claggy McLawhorn quickly exclaims, "Now?" Fez Lightholder hesitates and admits that he is not entirely sure why the genie phrased it that way. He nervously suggests that maybe it wasn't true before. Groch de Konig completely loses his temper and screams that Fez Lightholder had just asked the genie to make Christianity true. Fez Lightholder immediately protests that he absolutely did not do that and had only wanted confirmation that it was already true. Von Beagle closes his eyes and quietly murmurs, "Oh my God." At that exact moment, Innocent Zadovsky, Omer the Bykar, and Narcissa Griffiths casually arrive behind them as though they had simply wandered into the wrong room at the wrong time. Innocent Zadovsky cheerfully says hello. Omer the Bykar echoes the greeting a second later. Narcissa Griffiths calmly takes in the impossible scene around them. The glowing genie with its drifting ribbons of living light, the orbiting halo fragments, the stunned crew, and Fez Lightholder standing there looking like a man who has accidentally touched eternity. Then Narcissa Griffiths, the former First Lady of America, calmly asks what they missed. Nobody answers. The genie simply stands there in silence, while the floating bands of light continue orbiting around its shifting half-formed face. And somewhere high above them, the great mechanisms continue to turn. Later, the AngelKrafft makes its long journey home through deep space. Thanks to the Halo drive, Peppy Teagarden is still actively quantum sharing to hundreds of millions of stunned followers scattered across human space. Peppy Teagarden softly answers questions she clearly does not know how to answer, gently repeating variations of "I don't rightly know" and "Y'all know about as much as we do," while trying unsuccessfully to sound reassuring. Nearby on the flight deck, Von Beagle, Fez Lightholder, Groch de Konig, and Afreka Moonshower stand together in uneasy silence while Claggy McLawhorn works through the final flight checklists from the left pilot's chair. The only sounds aboard the ancient spacecraft are the uneven hum of the old systems, Claggy McLawhorn quietly reading checklist items to herself in her soft Scottish murmur, and Peppy Teagarden continuing her calm, uncertain responses to millions of frightened followers. Eventually, Claggy McLawhorn finishes the final checklist. Then silence settles over the flight deck again. Nobody really knows what to do now. Nobody knows what to say. And for the first time since this all began, there are no immediate repairs to make, no enemies to outrun, no riddles to solve, and no tasks left to distract them from what may have happened. Then, almost absent-mindedly, Peppy Teagarden begins softly singing, "I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart," apparently leading her share audience in song simply because she cannot think of anything else to do. A few moments later, Fez Lightholder quietly joins in. Groch de Konig reluctantly mutters along after that. Then Von Beagle, then eventually even Claggy McLawhorn and Africa Moonshower. None of them sing with conviction. None of them even sing particularly well. They sing the way people do when they are exhausted, stunned, frightened, and desperately trying to fill silence that has become too large to sit inside comfortably. And as the battered old AngelKrafft heads home through the stars, this time the territory ahead is truly and forever uncharted. In the Atomic Zone.